What's up, pitchers? Let's hear it one more time for George.
Thank you so much.
Let me sit down first.
Oh, shit.
All right, Norma, go sit down.
Wait for Norma.
You're gonna be your heckler.
How's the
Of
mic?
course, always need one.
How's the mic sound for you? Not bad?
It sounds good up here. How's it sounding back there? We good? Perfect.
Yeah.
Norma, do you need a hand over there?
I should give her
All right, thanks, George.
You good, Norma?
Woman, always fine, eh? Kenny, I'm an alcoholic. It's okay now, though. I only used to drink 3 to 5 gallons a week. It's all good. No, I was at a party one night, got sent to the hospital. My spleen was borderline enlarged. They sent me for an ultrasound and called me 3 days later and said, Kenny, you're not drinking anymore. I said, why? Well, your spleen's enlarged. Okay, well, what's a spleen? It's not important, is it? I'm like, are you stupid? I was in special ed, so a little bit. And I said, no, what's going on with the spleen? They're like, well, it's borderline enlarged. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, buddy.
And I said, well, okay, well, how bad is it? And they're like, have you ever heard of the game Russian roulette? I'm like, yeah, but I don't got a gun and I don't got a bullet. And they're like, well, put it to you this way. Every beer you have is a bullet. If you have another beer within 6 months, you could die. That's a good reason to take a break from drinking. So my mom shows up at the hospital at midnight and she said, are you drunk? I'm like, no. You sure? How much did you drink? Half of the supply at the party. She said, you stupid? I was in special ed, so a little bit. You raised me. You know this. You call me dumbass for a reason, you know? And, but no, it was great. My mom was fantastic. The first time she ever saw me hammered was a Blue Jays home opener. My buddy and I went to went to Hooters, and we ordered 3 pitchers. We drank 2.5 of them. We looked at the third half empty one, and we're like, well, we can't pour that down the sink. And he's like, I'm wasted. And I said, I'm wasted too, but you know what? My mom's giving us a ride, so I'm not going to waste it, pour it in my glass. So I drank it, and I'm outside leaning against the building. And I was like, pulls up, you drunk? No, I'm just making sure the building don't fall over. So, of course, my mom being one of those nagging parents. Anybody else here have a nagging parent when it's always after you for everything you do?
I don't.
No? You're lucky. You had a good childhood, my friend.
I did.
So, she's like, we get home, and she's like, you're so drunk. I said, I know. I said, I know you're going to lecture me, aren't you? She said, I'm your mother, it's my job. I said, okay, so why don't you have some fun with this and wait until the morning when I'm, one, hungover, and I'll feel like crap, and then you can make me feel even worse. She said, that sounds fun. Doesn't it, though? And I'll actually remember their lecture, because I'll be hungover and not drunk. Because if you say it now, you know I'm not going to remember it, so save your breath. She said, that's the first time I'm allowing you to give me attitude, and it's also the last one. So, hey, I do what I do. And, but no, going back, here's how wild my mom was. She was unpredictable. Unpredictable. I didn't know if I was going to get a pat on the back or a slap in the face. It was great. So, in school one day, the teacher says, Kenny, it's show and tell. And I said, oh, okay. She said, what do you got? And I'm like, well, I got nothing. I got nothing. I said, wait a minute. I can't show you anything, but I can tell you a joke. And she said, okay, let's hear it. I said, okay, well, that's one that I just heard, so here it goes. And I said, well, there's these 2 farmers. Economy's, in the tank like it always is. And they want to split some fertilizer 50-50. So Mr. Leopard says to Mr. Turtle, he knows a guy that can give him a good price. And they both got a small field, so they can just split a load in half. Mr. Turtle says, yeah, that's great. And Mr. Leopard says, great, I'll have my guy come by on Saturday. Saturday rolls around, and Mr. Rabbit knocks on the door. Mrs. Leopard answers. And he says, hello, ma'am. Good afternoon. Is Mr. Leopard in? And she said, well, young man, Mr. Leopard is in the backyard. And he says, okay, well, is Mr. Turtle around? And she says, well, Mr. Turtle is down by the well. And he said, great, I got a job to do. I'm on a tight schedule. He's like, can you do me a favor and tell one of those two guys that Mr. Rabbit is here with the shit? So I get home from school, and Mom's like, so how was school? I'm like, great. Are you gonna pat me on the back or slap me in the face? I'm like, school was perfect. I didn't fight with anybody. I didn't give anybody any attitudes. It was a perfect day at school. You sure about that? Yes, I'm gonna say is the right answer on this one. And she's like, you sure? You wanna change your story? I'm like, no. And she's like, well, why'd the teacher call me? The teacher called you? I didn't do anything. Why's the teacher calling you? Or arrange your afternoon tea? I don't know. And she's like, well, try again. I'm like, try again. Oh, great. I'm digging my own grave over here, and I don't even know how. So I'm like, okay, well, I told the joke. I told the joke at show and tell that might or might not have anything to do with this. And she's like, well, what was the joke? So I tell her. She's like, okay, smartass, where'd you learn that joke? I said, well, your dad. So she calls Grandpa, do you know what your grandson did at school today? And she's like, no, Melanie, I'm in Barrie. I don't know what your kid did at school because he's 150 kilometers away. And he's like, I got a business store and I don't know what your kid did at school. Tell me. Well, he told this joke. He said, well, I didn't know he'd remember that joke. Yeah, it's 35 years later, Grandpa. And so she's like, you can't be telling him dirty jokes like that. And he's like, Melanie, chill. He's like, calm down. At least the kid learned he can't say shit in school. And she's like, well, you got a point. So, yeah, and, my mom, she was great. I love her dearly. She passed away in 2023. And she's like, you're such a smartass. Why don't you go into comedy? Why don't I go into comedy? I don't know. So I did. And it's been a great time. I love it. And boy, what else can I say about my mom? There's lots. She was always busting my balls, busting my chops, keeping me in line, and just being a really great mom. I remember one day, she was a real stickler for rules. And I was going to get fired from my job if I was going to be late one more time. It was about a 20-minute drive to work, and I woke up 10 minutes before I had to be there. So I said, Mom, I'm going to be late. I don't want to lose this thing. It's great. I've got friends there, And I'm like, can I please have a ride? And she's like, sure. I'm like, okay, something's up. I'm like, okay. Well, no offense, but you're a bit of a slower driver. And I know I only got my G1, but I kind of got to get there. Can I please drive? She's like, yeah, not a problem. Yeah, not a problem. I'm like, okay. So I grab the keys. I do the drive in 5 minutes. Pull into the parking lot at work. And she's like, you should have put it into 5th gear. I said, yeah, it was a 5-speed master. I was cooking like 80 through the 60s and all that fun shit. And she's like, yeah, you should have put it into 5th. I said, well, if I put it into 5th, you would have known I was speeding. And she's like, well, I'm in the passenger seat. I can see the bloody speedometer, you dumbass. Like, oh, well, I knew if I put it into 5th, it'd be obvious. And she said, well, it was obvious. You forget I've been driving for 30 plus years. Well, yeah, that's true. And she's like, you're not driving the car for 2 weeks. I said, okay, I'll take that. I will take that. That's fine. So I waited 17 days before I asked to drive the car again. And she's like, I was expecting you to wait 14 days and then ask me right after your 2 weeks was up. And I said, yeah, but I was driving like a jackass and I deserve to get grounded for driving the car. So, I decided to add 3 days to my punishment just to make you happy. And she's like, oh, I appreciate that. And I'm like, she's like, I gotta go to the mall. I'm like, so can I drive? And she's like, are you gonna be a jackass? I'm like, no, that was a one-time thing because I had to get to work. So, we had one of those unique relationships where things were good and then they were sideways. Kids in school, they couldn't figure out why I was so good at dodgeball. Well, when the balls turn into shoes, scissors, glue bottles, and anything within reach, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball is a very true statement. So, they're like, how are you so good at dodgeball. I'm like, I'm not allowed to answer that without CAS getting involved. And they're like, why? I said, if I tell you I have to kill you, and I don't want to kill you because you're a good guy. So, one day I was at Kmart with my mom, and she'd always take me clothes shopping for her. And I'm like, I'm a 7-8-year-old boy. I don't want to shop for clothes. Clothes are gross. Ew, who needs clothes? I'm a guy. I walk around my underwear. I do not care. Okay? So I disappear and go off to the cool section of the store, being electronics, where they have PlayStations and N64s and all that fun stuff that I'm too broke to have. So an associate comes walking over to me and he's like, you Kenny? Kenny? Who's asking? And he's like, well, your mom. I'm like, you leave my mom out of this, bro. Like, do you see her around? No, I don't think so. And she's like, no, she's looking for you at the front of the store, and we're about to lock the store down if you don't get there. I'm like, oh, fantastic. So mom was like, yeah, where'd you disappear to? I'm like, look at TVs we can't afford. She's like, what do you mean we can't afford TV? I'm like, you know you're broke. I know it just as well as you do. And she's like, I just heard on the radio before we came in the store that there was an Amber Alert, and I thought you got abducted. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I scared you. And she's like, yeah, you better be. And she's like, wait a minute. On second thought, they spend 10 minutes with you, and they'll return you. I'm not even worried. What? You're not worried about your kid getting abducted when you are worried about your kid getting abducted? I'm like, how crazy are you, woman? And she's like, I'm crazier than you ever figure out. And I'm like, no shit. No shit. Like, holy. Like, I never know what's coming out of your mouth. And she's like, I never know what's coming out of yours. I'm like, well, I'm your kid, so what do you expect? Apples don't fall far from trees. And she's like, yeah, well, I still love you. I'm like, I love you too. And she's like, you're a pain in the ass. I said, you're a pain in the ass too. And she's like, you got such a smart mouth. And I said, I do. I really do. And the other week, I called up my grade 4 or 5 teacher. I told her class clown became a comedian. And she said, well, you were a good kid. And I said, yeah, but Lou, I was a good kid, but you and I both know I was a smart ass. And she's like, yeah, but you were a wholesome smart ass, so it was good. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. So after I finished grade 5, she retired from teaching. Like, I was the reason this woman quit school. Like, I made you go into therapy to teach other kids therapy. Like, what, how broken are you from me? And she's like, no, you didn't break me. I'm like, I beg to differ, because you look like pretty broken right now. You had to quit teaching and retire to go into counseling. And she said, no, I knew your life story, and I wanted to help all the other kids that were like Kenny. And I said, oh, I inspired you. Okay. And so, speaking of therapy, I've been through lots of it. It was great. It was great. If burning in hell is a great place to be. They said, I go into my therapist's office, and she's like, based on your life experience and the amount of time you spend in the hospital taking care of your mom, she's like, based on your hospital hours, you should be a doctor. I'm like, okay. And she's like, based on your life experience alone, you should be a social worker. I said, okay. And I said, so why aren't I either of those things? I'm like, can I get an honorary degree? And she's like, no, you got to go to school. And I said, school. And I said, well, I don't want to go work in a hospital, but I could run a counseling session. And she's like, you know what, you could. And I said, so where's my honorary degree? And she's like, no, you got to go to school for 2 years. I said, so you mean I got to pay money and go sit in the classroom and learn about something I can teach a class on? I'm like, I've got ADHD for fuck's sake. Like, I can't do this shit. I'll be bored out of my mind. And then I realized that you don't need a degree to hold a microphone and stand on a stage. So it's perfect. And like,
Stop.
therapy, who needs therapy? You got comedy.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, you know, I love to debate. I love a good heated debate. My teacher, my high school teacher in grade 11, grade 12, she used to be the secretary for Brian Mulrooney. So one day she's lipping off, trying to cram politics down our throats. And I just straight up said to her, I said, you know what? Is this a classroom or a debate room in the House of Commons? And she's like, well, this is my classroom, and if I want to teach politics and cram them down your throat, you're going to eat them. No. And I said, wait a minute. Didn't you just say you were the secretary for Byron Mulrooney? And she's like, yeah. I said, so maybe you can enlighten the class and tell us what exactly was in that brown envelope. She looked at me like she was about to drop dead, and she's like, how do you know about that? I said, well, you know, I don't know about that. I thought it was a conspiracy theory, but thanks for telling me otherwise. And she's like, well, you better not tell anybody else. I was like, oops, I've already told two clubs that story already. And it's not even been a week. My bad. So, you know, that's what I love about comedy. And doing comedy and having the secretary of Brian Mulrooney cram bullshit down my throat for 2 years, I came to understand something. So I like to ask people when I meet them, what's the difference between a comedian and a politician? Comedians tell the truth. Politicians will feed you bullshit. Comedians talk shit about life. And my show last week, somebody said the salary. I was like, well, you're not entirely wrong. But, you know, the comedians will tell you the truth because we talk about life. That's where comedy comes from, you see. Before I even started comedy, I was talking to my uncle at Tim Hortons over coffee. I said, you know, I'm going to give comedy a shot. You know, I don't got a job right now. I got to do something. You said I got to do something, so I'm going to try comedy. And he's like, really? You, comedy? He's like, of all things, of all possible things that I could think of you coming out of your mouth, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. He's like, comedy, what's your material? And I said, well, my life story. And he's like, oh, man, you might just make it. And I said, I know. Like, the social worker said that, like, the story like mine, something she only seen in Hollywood. And I wish I could make half of this stuff up, because it'd be great. I'd have a brilliant mind. But no, I just lived it. So, I really do feel at home on the stage. And I always have a great crowd. I haven't had a crowd I didn't like. And I did my first show at Yuck Yucks. I got invited back for the 29th. And I told them that, thank you. Yeah, I told him it was my first time on stage, and the MC came to me at the end of the show. He's like, was that your first time on stage? Or are you just bullshitting us? And I said, no, that was my first time on stage. He's like, well, if you hone your craft and keep doing what you're doing, you're going to do great. So, you know, that vote of confidence right out the gate really gave me incentive, really gave me some motivation. And I'm actually practicing my set right now that I'm going to do at Yuck Yucks on the 29th, in 3 days from now. Yeah. So you guys are the guinea pigs. I'm sorry.
That's what it's here for.
Sorry, not sorry. George, you're great. I love the gig you're running. It's my first time here. The first time I was here, I swear the beer was watered down. And then I figured out very quickly, because I was with my best friend, who's also my manager, that I was just crying into my beer over the Leafs performance. So I couldn't give Jay shit at all, because it was entirely my bad. Well, it was because of the Leafs were bad. I've seen better hockey come out of the Timbits, for fuck's sake. And my uncle and his best friend are diehard Habs fans. So all hockey season, my aunt hates being in the house. She wants us to take it outside because she's like, who's playing? Well, the Leafs in Montreal. And she's like, so you guys are enemies? I said, yeah, I can take him into the corner right now. And he's like, this guy smokes crack. I'm like, you smoke crack. At least our logo doesn't look like a toilet seat. So he's like, yeah, at least we've won more cups. I'm like, at least we make the playoffs. Well, you guys were only good when you had Price, because he stood on his head that game. And he's like, he's like, I gotta give it to you Leafs fans, because you guys are stubborn. I said, well, I'm also a Sagittarius, so, there's that going too. And he's like, well, you're really stubborn. And I said, well, yeah. I spent 3 months of my life in your dad's work office where he was running his plastic business at 7 or 8 years old. And he's like, well, this is true. So the reason I was there was my mom was in the hospital for 3 months. And she gets out, I go back to I go back to her place, and our phone's cut off. Doesn't work. So she walks down to the payphone at the strip mall and uses the payphone to call Bell. And she's like, listen, I just got out of the hospital. I haven't been able to pay any bills. And, I'm really sick and I'm really tired. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And woman on the phone's like, too bad, you're cut off. You're not doing anything. And I'm standing there looking at my mom, seeing her about ready to pass out. And, the only person who was allowed to fuck with my mom was me. Because I'm her kid. It's my job. Anybody else? No. They get a hellstorm 10 times worse than whatever my mom's got. And she's like, well, can you talk to my son? And I said, yeah. She's like, I can talk to your son, I guess. So my mom hands me the phone. I take a look at her, and I just say, don't worry, I got this. And she's like, what do you mean you got this? I said, you're letting me handle this? I said, I can't get in trouble for anything I say right now. I said, because I'm doing business. And she's like, okay. I said, no, you want me to be a man? I'm going to be a man right now, right here. And she's like, okay, handle it. I'm sick. I'm tired. I just want to go home. So I grabbed the phone and I said, listen, lady. The woman on the phone's like, excuse me? I said, you heard me. And she's like, what? I said, you're going to turn this phone back on right now. And she's like, no, you're past due. I cut you off. You're not getting your services back. I said, okay, look. You're dealing with an 8-year-old kid right now who's not afraid of anything, let alone some voice over a phone. And she's like, excuse me? I said, excuse me, nothing, woman. I said, listen, if my mom has a medical crisis, can I call 911? And she's like, no, all your services are cut off. You don't got any access to 911. I said, okay, so let me tell you what's going to happen. I said, what's going to happen is we're going to pay 25 to 50% of our back payment on our future bills. And she said, well, that's not good enough. I said, well, that is going to be good enough, because here's what's going to happen if you don't. I said, she just got out of the hospital. And she's like, yeah, I'm very sorry about that. I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. Don't lie to me. I said, it's me you're trying to lie to. I'm an 8-year-old kid. Doesn't mean I'm a blind fool. I said, I might be a little stupid because I'm in a special ed class, but that has nothing to do with this conversation. And she's like,